We're going to talk today about symmetry, and we're going to kind of skip ahead just a little bit, but we're going to be on page 63 of our notebook. So if you want to go ahead and turn to page 63, we are going to start there with types of symmetry. Okay, so again, we're on page 63, and this is types of symmetry. Okay, there are two types of symmetry that we're going to talk about. Number one is line symmetry. And our line symmetry comes from reflections, which we just talked about. So line symmetry is a figure, or when a figure can be mapped onto itself using reflection. Okay, so if we go back to the reflection lesson, we can see that I have that line of reflection, or that line of symmetry, that everything on one side is equal distance to the stuff on the other side. The other type of symmetry I can have is rotational symmetry. And rotational symmetry is when a figure can be mapped onto itself using rotation. And we like to stay 180 degrees or less, okay, for rotational symmetry. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a ton of examples of these types of symmetry. So we're going to split our notebook into two sections here. On one side, you're going to have line symmetry. And on the other, you're going to have rotation. Now, I'm going to do a couple examples here, and then I'm going to let you try to fill in some. Okay, so if we look at line symmetry, things such as a heart. A heart has line symmetry, if you draw it correctly anyway, and that it has one line of symmetry. Things like a ladder might have line symmetry. And if you draw it just right, it could actually have two lines of symmetry. It could have a line here and also a line here. If I fold my object on this line symmetry, the left and the right, or the top and the bottom, should exactly line up on one another. Okay, we could look at letters such as H, which is kind of like your ladder, or the letter I. Okay, both of those have two lines of symmetry, depending on, again, all this depends on how you draw them. So I is there and there. Okay, so that's some line symmetry. Rotational symmetry. Okay, there's kind of a formula for rotational symmetry also, and that is degree of rotation equals 360 divided by number of sections. I'll explain what that means here in just a second. So, for example, a square. A square has rotational symmetry, and in order to find out the degrees of rotation, you need to split this up into equal sections. And you kind of start in the middle and you can say, okay, I can split this into a section, and all my sections have to be identical. Okay, or it's how many times it repeats. So here it repeats 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to take 360 divided by 4 and get 90 degrees. So this square has 90 degrees of rotation. A plus sign. Okay, a plus sign, if I start in the middle, okay, there's one section, there's two sections, there's 3 and 4 sections. So this has 4 identical sections. So it's 360 divided by 4. So it's also 90 degrees of rotation. We could look at an equilateral triangle. Okay, so let's see. Kind of running out of room here. So let's say all sides are the same. Well, those sections are there. So now that's 1, 2, 3 sections. So 360 divided by 3 is 120. So an equilateral triangle has 120 degrees of rotation, meaning every time I turn it 120 degrees, it lines up on itself. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, see if you can add some images here in both line and rotational symmetry. On the rotational symmetry, make sure to find the degrees of rotation. And on line symmetry, make sure you draw all possible lines. Go ahead and pause and work on that. If you haven't paused, go ahead and pause and get some down, at least 3 or 4 on each section. Okay, let's just run through some more examples here. So we could say the number 8. Or a snowman here could have 1, 2 lines of symmetry there. An eyeball. May have, this one looks like it only has 1 line of symmetry here. Sometimes you can draw the line symmetry this way. Okay, but I only went 1, 2 here, and I went 1, 2, 3 there. So that's not the same distance. The letter A has 1 line of symmetry. The word Bob could have 1 line of symmetry right here. Maybe the word Ohio in all capitals has 1 line of symmetry. We're looking at lines of symmetry, not things that are spelt the same forwards and backwards. The number 101 has line symmetry this way and this way. A square okay, a square has several, so it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of symmetry. Butterflies. if you draw them right. Mine not so much. Butterfly could have one line of symmetry. And there's actually one shape that has infinite lines of symmetry, and that would be a circle. A circle has infinite lines of symmetry. You can just keep drawing as many lines in there as you want. Okay, rotational symmetry. We can look at something like a star, a five-pointed star. Okay, if all points were perfect. So then we would have one section, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 360 divided by 5 is 72 degrees. So every 72 degrees, it's going to land on itself. So 72 and 144, it's going to land on itself. Okay, like a flower or a sunflower. Okay, with a sunflower here, 1, 2, you can just kind of draw all these sections through the petals. Now we're kind of pretending that all the petals are exactly the same, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 360 divided by 11 gives you 32.7 degrees of rotation. Okay, so every 32.7 degrees, it's going to land on itself. And kind of some words. SOS. If you rotate it around 180 degrees, it looks exactly the same. The word swims. Has rotational symmetry. If I take my notebook and I rotate it, it still reads swims. Okay, another shape, maybe a stop sign. Okay, with the stop sign, I kind of drew mine a little bit narrow, but it's going to have 8 sections. Okay, those 8 sections, 36 divided by 8 is 45 degrees. So every 45 degrees, it's going to land on itself. 45, 90, 135, and 180. Okay. There's also logos. Okay, we could look at this logo. Kind of drew it bad, but I think you get where I'm going with this. Okay, that has rotational symmetry. 1 section, 2 sections, 3 sections. So again, like the equilateral triangle, has 120 degrees of rotation. So we have lots of line symmetry and rotational symmetry that we can look at. So you're going to have an assignment on big ideas over these types of symmetry.